you see, JD Power 2023 US initial quality study putting Dodge Ram and Alfa Romeo as, in their opinion, the most reliable vehicles that you can have out there. And, Tim, I hope this doesn't bother you. It doesn't, that I'm talking about this. JD Power can be mad at me. Tim, this is not Tim Bartz's
opinion.
Opinion. This is my bone to pick. But I truly have trouble imagining that an Alfa Romeo is more reliable than a Toyota or a Lexus. I'd say Alfa Romeo is historically and notoriously, I'd even say infamously known for being steaming piles of hot garbage that are beautiful. I was looking at an Alfa Romeo 4C. Instead of picking up the Bronco Wildtrak, which I'm getting in at the dealership under my ordered name. So I'm like, oh, I've got, and I love the vehicle. But I was like, I'd also really love an Alfa Romeo 4C. It's probably a future very collectible vehicle. But then I asked myself, what are the chances I keep it long enough to make money on it? I can't personally. I consume vehicles at a rate that makes it that I can't have that sit in my garage for 10, 12 years. And Marie's always going to be saying things like, oh, well, can you paint this baby crib in the garage? And if there's a car sitting there, it's going to make me nervous painting on one side of my double garage, beside an Alfa Romeo 4C. But the thing is essentially a Ferrari with a smaller four-cylinder engine. So it's incredible, but it's a hot pile of garbage. Same thing for a Mini, long-term. Minis are horrible vehicles to own. A Mini is a fine vehicle if you want to go lease one and you like that look.
Cost a lot and reparation.
You've told me before that you found the Mini cute, and I told you to stop talking politely. I was like, no, I don't want to hear it, honey. Don't. I don't want to get into a fight.
That car.
I'm like, don't even talk about. When I see a Mini go by, I either want you to not say anything, or I want to hear like a noise.
It was just cute because the new neighbors has too many different. They had a black one and a red one in their driveway. That's so cute, but. For sure, it was.
One died, by the way. Yeah, one died.
It's the sound in the morning. It's like a tractor was turning on the switch.
And it died. It left on a tow truck. And
you saw that?
it left on a tow truck, honey, and it never came back.
No, it did a horrible sound each morning.
So Dodge and Ram are not the most long-term reliable vehicles out there, and Alfa Romeo is a real joke, folks, to be number 3. However, how do they calculate this? It's not because they're bad people. It's because they're dealing with new vehicles, and they're using the data that they can get their hands on. And the readily easy to get data is how many problems do you have per 100 people? So you've got Dodge at 140 problems per 100 people, and you've got Alfa Romeo at 143 problems per 100 people. And yeah, in Alfa Romeo, the vehicles aren't, the technology, the touchscreens in them aren't complicated. A lot of the models don't even have touchscreens. So someone's not going to go to the dealership saying, hey, I've got a problem. My touchscreen is broken. The Bluetooth is broken. When often it's just that they've got the Bluetooth off on their phone, or their phone is acting funny, because these are very small laptops and they need to be reset. Really, you should turn them off every single night. But some people will have had this running for the last year and a half, 2 years, and then the communication is no longer viable between the phone and the vehicle. And it's not that the vehicle is broken, but we now have a problem, a problem being added. You're part of that, let's say Dodge here at 140 problems per 100 people, you're adding on to that list. And that's how, JD Power initial quality study, that's how it works. That's part of the whole deciding factor to Consumer Reports reliability. They're really looking at the problems people have. They're not looking at what types of problems. You can have models in here that blow motors on a consistent basis as soon as they get to 150 or 200 miles or even less, and it wouldn't appear as a problem, because we're talking about just essentially problems in the first year. And there's no differentiation between what kind of problems we have, and there's no weighting to those problems. Very few of these makes are going to have blown motors in the first year. And actually, all of these manufacturers are going to have blown motors in their first year, but they're going to be in very, very rare, small percentages. And even if they were in relatively high percentages, let's say one of these manufacturers had a model that had, this doesn't happen, but let's say 5%, 1 out of 20 of their engines would blow. One, it's probably not going to happen in its first year. It's not even really going to show up. And if it did, if it was high enough of a ratio to show up, it would still get balanced out with people having problems with their Bluetooth, or with, heck, I've had it on my F-150 Lightning. I actually even had it on my Bronco. Turn on my Bronco one morning, the computer didn't want to load up the touchscreen for whatever reason, probably because it was minus 40 degrees outside. And if I would have slept outside, I'd be dead. So how can I really have a bone to pick with my vehicle? But as soon as my vehicle warmed up and I turned the vehicle off and turned it back on, well, then the touchscreen did turn on. Well, if I go to the dealership, make a complaint, I'm on this list. My complaint isn't reasonable. It was minus 40 in Canada. Everything that was outside is now dead. Dead.
Or so slow.
or very slow. Nothing lives in these temperatures. And my vehicle just needed to warm up before being able to boot up the touchscreen. It happened to me twice in an entire winter on the Bronco. Had I made a complaint, my complaint would, fall onto this list.
So if I recap what you said, it's a big problem and small problem are in the same box.
Yes. And manufacturers now are everyone's mostly building pretty much all very, very good vehicles. Everyone has a very small percentage of vehicles that will have blown motors or blown transmissions, but this is why we have warranties. These things happen. You have to remember, they're not building these aren't built by hand by a team of, 7 engineers that have 1 year to build 10 vehicles together. No, these are mass produced. Just like when we buy a pair of sneakers, you can have a sneaker company make 1 million pairs of sneakers, and there'll be a few of those pairs of sneakers that once they get wet, for whatever reason, they'll fall apart. It's just part of the manufacturing process, and it cannot be avoided. But one very interesting truth in all of this is if we look at previous years, so this is actually worth considering. So there's a question in this coming towards you, Tim. In 2023, we've got 140 problems per person for the number 1 spot. And let's go see what it was in 2019. 2019, we had 63 problems per 100 people for the number 1 spot. Ford was at 83 problems per 100 people. So Ford was almost at the top of J.D. Power's, reliability quality list. What do you think's happened since 2019 to 2023?
More electronics, got more power, got bigger screens, and now we're moving everything into the screens, instead of having so many buttons and everything. I mean, yeah, that's probably the big thing. And also maybe it's the ownership too, because like you said, it's it's for everything that's once it's counting every little thing that you're saying is wrong. Okay, well, the airbag light came on and the check engine light came on and all these things, so those all count as multiple things instead of, like I said, they can be minor things that they just reset with a system reboot, and then but the major ones is what I like to see. What's the cost? I'd love to see like service ticket prices on these things, and let's compare it that way instead of per orders. But yeah, when I saw it was like over 100 per 100, I'm like, wow, that seems high. Like even number 1 seemed high. I'm like,
yeah,
that means
absolutely.
everybody's has at least one problem, which floors me.
Well, I think you're completely right. I think vehicles have become significantly more complex. And I also think since we all got, locked away in our own homes for months at end, I think we all became more complex ourselves. We all became a little bit more Karen, the typical mean of Karen complaining to the manager. We all have less patience. We all have, far more demands. Our demands have gone up while our patience has gone down. And when demands go up and patience goes down, the result is you have people being more often not just saying, I'm not going to sweat the small stuff. No, since 2019, because of everything that's happened, people do sweat the small stuff. People are really willing and often almost ready to get into a fist fight over the small stuff. People, I remember I've been doing this, and I used to help manage the residences at a university, and we originally saw the transition of people probably a little earlier than a lot of other businesses. But we went from a time when parents would be like, can't you give more discipline to my child? Like, can't you punish them more? Like, my child really needs to learn that rules are rules and they should never be broken. To, my child would never break any rules. How dare you? I'm gonna sue you. I'm gonna bring you to court and sue you for everything you're worth because you're accusing my child of doing something they would never do. And it's like, well, we have cameras. How could you be filming my child? I'm going to take you to court and sue you for filming my child. And it's like, well, it's in the small print that your child, that your, adult child signed. And, so things have
Things have changed a lot.
things have changed. And, if we go back historically, you used to go to school and you'd be all in one building, in one room, and the teacher would use a ruler and, hit the ruler on your hand. And, I remember I've received a wooden paddle on my backside once or twice when I was a young lad, but nowadays my parents would go to jail for that kind of thing. So times change and they don't necessarily always change for the better. And there's always pros and cons to everything. So maybe we're a bit more sensitive of a society and we let things work us up a little bit more. But what I would propose is, Tim, you and I need to start a company. And, if we want to copy the initials here, JD, we'd have to follow the same order, but we'd have to call it JT, Johnny and Tim's quality. And we'd have to look at the data, like you said, we have to look at the data of what is it costing people? How much money? And whether it's costing people or the manufacturer, the real question is what broke? How much did it cost? When I buy a vehicle, I want to know if I'm going to own this for the next 20 years, on average, what can I expect to pay into the vehicle? Because unfortunately, so many consumers, when they're shopping, and we see because the Toyota Tacoma is selling about 200,000 units a year, and they're selling 200,000 units a year when they're consuming more fuel. If you had a medium to heavy foot, you're consuming more fuel in a Tacoma than a 2.7 liter Ford F-150. The 2.7 liter Ford F-150 towing, capability of towing 10,000 pounds was getting kind of quite a bit better fuel economy. And people will often they won't think about what is this going to cost me at the end of every single year. They're just thinking, for example, what is this going to cost me per month as a payment? And then they also like the idea, a lot of people I think like the idea of, well, I like the Toyota Tacoma because the thing's never going to break. But if it ends up costing you an extra, over 20 years, if you spend an extra $8,000-9,000 in fuel or more, you might even spend, compared to some vehicles, definitely spend a good $7,000 to $8,000 over a 12 to 15 year period driving a Tacoma compared to a 2.7 liter EcoBoost Ford, and you'll have a whole lot more fun in that F-150 2.7 liter EcoBoost because that is a very torquey engine. And we can't say that to be true for, just most Toyota products, period. Despite me, I love some Toyota products, but, power they're getting into the power game now, and I'm impressed.
Yeah. You know what? I saw a comment from M. Baker here that I love. He said, maybe more reading of the manual will help all of us. I agree with that. I was reading my Maverick manual, and Johnny was saying, hey, don't read that. You don't need it. I was like, no, I want to understand my car. So I won't be the one who will be complaining at the dealership because I read the instructions. So thank you, M. Baker.